Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Architecture Social Live. And I'm joined here with a fantastic guest. That's the only sound I had there. But we need a more epic. We need a more epic reveal for him. But I've got a proper architect in the making, studying his part 3, content creator, and YouTube extraordinaire. Am I allowed to say that? Am I allowed to say that? Well, actually, I'm going to say it anyways. Hamza, you are here on LinkedIn. How are you today?
I'm good, and I'm gonna have to speak fairly quiet because there's a kid, my kid, sleeping in the other room.
Well, don't worry. We're a perfect match for that because I'm extremely loud. So between us,
Well, look,
sorry.
first of all, that intro was. You should have a show on the BBC, mate. I don't know how it's not happened yet.
Well, we'll get there. But okay, before we talk about today's agenda, I've upped the production. Okay, so I've got a few things. I want you to critique my show quickly before we talk about the future of architects. So I've got memes, okay, and I've looked hard for architecture memes, okay. So did you know Frank Gehry was in The Simpsons?
Yes.
You know, you did. And there we go. There's his building. So I got an architecture meme for you. And as well as that, I got my favorite meme at the moment, which is working from home, which I think is perfect, isn't it? That seems like what it's like for me. So I've got that, and I've got some other surprises as well. Okay, but we'll roll on. We'll roll on because this is not all about memes, even though I love a good meme. This is actually a serious conversation. So I'll get my bell ready. That's a real bell.
Serious.
Wow, it depends. The intention will be serious, but then I'm hosting, so it tends to derail and go off in a tangent. But we thought we would talk about today discussing the future generation of architects, what that entails in this new modern world. Now, before we go on to that, if anyone hasn't seen you online or anything like that, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you're up to? And then we can go into the topic.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's always hard to kind of describe it, I'll be honest with you, because there's quite a few things. And I haven't sort of consolidated everything into one place. However, Two Worlds Design is the most consolidated form of what I do. So if you guys want to go and check out Two Worlds Design .co.uk, everything is there. Essentially, I create a podcast series which explores the multidisciplinary potential of architecture. So for like the last 4 or 5 years, I've been not very regularly, but with waves of busyness, been speaking to people on the fringes of architecture.
There you are. You're you're here and you're in the trailer. This is your website. And I like your podcast, by the way, which is seriously cool.
Yes, it was an amazing sort of journey that I started in the middle of my master's, and I wanted to make the most of the sound recording facilities at the University of Westminster, and all the incredible researchers and practitioners around me in central London. So I was like, I might as well start a podcast series. And it was just a trip because you can see in the images I spoke to Angela Brady, the ex-president of RIBA, Adam Nathaniel Furman, who's just killing it as a designer. And so the theme, as I mentioned, is just people with architectural backgrounds who are doing something on the fringe. And I think that kind of ties into the broader topic today anyway. But as you can see as well, I do drawings. I think I took I spent a lot of time trying to create accessible tutorials, workshops for students who really felt in university, as I did, that there was not enough resources to learn, the practical skills related to drawing. And so I just started sharing my drawings and process, and one thing led to another.
Well, it looks really, really good. And one of the episodes that I watched and enjoyed in particular was with you with Marcus from Design. Now, there was like, it was an interesting episode, and I'm building the architecture social, and you build online platforms as well. So it was quite interesting to hear a man who's done a lot in his career, who's built this massive website, and I quite enjoyed, although again a little bit controversial, where he's saying, "So what's your favorite architect and all this stuff?" And he's like, "No, I'm not interested in that." And you're like, "What? You run the biggest architecture website?" And he's like, "No, I've got to keep my the line
Journalistic head
separate."
on, yeah.
Yeah, that was it. That was
That
interesting.
I've got some insights, some hidden stories about that interview if you want. So just getting him on the podcast, getting him to agree was just a massive task. I mean,
Of course, yeah.
let's be honest, he's a big deal, if we're going to be just blatantly honest. The guy who found Dezeen, I think for my generation, I can't speak for older generations, but we were raised in university knowing Dezeen as like almost like the Bible. Like, you go and get your references, and the database they've created, when you think about it in hindsight, is incredible. It's next to nothing right now, because you just go into the design database, type in anything you want, you'll get drawings, inspiration, precedent, research, everything. So he really was somebody who drastically influenced the field of architecture as a journalist. And so, so the way I actually got that interview, because a lot of people ask, how did you get Marcus Fears? And I sent a bunch of emails, of which there were no response. But then I was like, let me just jump into his DMs. So I think I just instant DM'd him.
You slipped right in there. He's like, "What's going on?" You're like, "Hey,
yeah,
I love that."
I just slipped into his DMs. I was like, "Marcus, do you want to jump on the podcast?" And he was like, "Yeah." And then he gave me his PA's email. I emailed the PA, and I think the PA was like, "Sorry, Marcus is too busy for this." And I was like, "What?"
Yeah, I got his permission. Did you know?
I was like,
I'm in his DMs. Okay.
I literally, that's what I did. I just sent him the screenshot and CC'd Marcus, and he's like, "No, I'm doing this." But
yeah, amazing.
When we got there, I set up my 180p HD camcorder from probably 2007 that I bought from CEX secondhand electronics store, and got these Amazon mic holders, and put two phones in there to record the audio. And I could tell he was a bit like, "Oh, this is not what I expected." But then the conversation started, and I got my interview.
You got your interview, and I felt the production was all right. I think like well, more than anyone, especially with cameras and stuff. There's like a level of, there's the nice cameras, but to be honest, as long as the audio's the main thing. And let me tell you, Hamza, I've recorded a few podcasts, and at the end, the audio is a bit crappy, and you're like, what do I do? Because that can really stop people listening. But it was good. Actually, while you're speaking, we got one or two people in the audience, because this is a live show. And so Emily Foster, and Emily is a really, really cool architectural apprentice at AHMM. She helped a lot, especially in the Architecture Social during the start. Says, congratulations on winning the Individual of the Year award. Was that last night then? Did you win?
Yeah. Thanks, Emily. Yeah, I did.
All right, we got to have a virtual round of applause for that, haven't we? I have to update this little, when it comes out, and I, take the sound and put it on Spotify. Now you're the Individual of the Year. Okay. Well, there you go.
I can show you. I got a little frame.
Yeah, let's get out the award. I haven't got like a drum roll, which isn't sarcastic, and I don't want to do that. So, yes, good for you. They're actually cool. That trust is really cool, isn't it? I didn't know much about the Thornton Education Trust. It's really cool.
Yeah, I think they just launched. It's an incredible initiative, and it was just a crazy feeling to be before even winning, just sat there listening to and kind of absorbing what was happening. Realizing that there is now a force, and there is more recognition of people doing things on the fringe of architecture.
Yeah.
Because all the people there, whether you want to call them practitioners in the field, or they were all doing something different to practice, and inspiring, as the award says, inspiring the future generation of architects. But everyone's on auto drive, and they're just doing it. And I think the first thing I felt was, and I think you could be definitely included into this, because we're a bunch of people who are putting out free content out there constantly, and we all are driven by one thing. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it's just if you can inspire one person, if one person is taking value from what you're doing, it just makes it worth it. So
Mm,
you're not even thinking about money. You're not even thinking about, all these material things. So I just had that weird realization yesterday that for the first time, things that are slightly alternative to practice are being recognized.
yeah, yeah. I
And
mean, a
again,
lot.
this bleeds into the conversation that we're probably going to have today. But
Yeah, well, it reminds me some of the stuff that you do in particular, Hamza, because you're good at sketching as well. It reminds me there's a really good website online called The Future, without the E at the end, and so they're kind of like an online trendsetter, more in graphic design and motion design as well, and they're really really cool. But you're right. I think what's interesting about online, I think there's a nice trade off, isn't it? Because I find that it's really nice doing one-on-ones. It's really nice going and being involved in seminars, being involved in discussions. But one of the interesting things about being online is that can reach a wider audience, and you have the live audience, and then you have the audience which watches the replay. So the reach is infinitely more. It's a little bit scary though. I mean, we're alive now, and I've got bells, and it's not edited, and we could say anything. Your baby at any moment, lovely, beautiful baby. Life happens, and I think you've got to be okay with going with the flow. But I think for a lot of people, it can be a little bit too scary, kind of going into that zone, because naturally, as professionals, you worry about you. We all have that humanistic thing of like, oh gosh, what if I say something? Will that affect my career? Will that
yeah,
affect my situation? I mean,
yeah.
I feel that, and I get the stress. Have you felt like that before, being a professional, architect in the making, part two, studying your part three, and making content as well?
I feel it now. I feel I've said it to people around me constantly. Like I feel like one day I might get cancelled, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
you've said it as well. So it's just like
yeah.
I think it's not as a result of it's as a result of we're in a very judgmental profession. We're in a
Mm,
very politicized profession. There's
yes.
all sorts of socio-political groups involved who have very close ties to politics, and that's just the reality of it.
Yeah, that's
Obviously,
true.
we have quite a big reach into the socio-political realm because that's the power of architecture.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think architecture is so much more than just one thing, and
Mm,
there's a massive shift happening at the moment. I think not just in the way architecture as a field is kind of spreading its wings, but I think also hopefully the infrastructure around it, the conversations, the discourse, it's opening up more and more,
mm,
as it should. So yeah, I think you're right. We're in a field where it is difficult for people to really feel like they can express their personal views, and but I think that's just the difficulty of the profession we're in, because you wouldn't say the same thing for like let's just say midwifery. They're not on
mm,
LinkedIn talking about their political views. They just get
mm.
on with their jobs. But
Yeah.
because our profession is so unique in a way, we are we're more often than not in positions of talking about politics, talking about difficult issues. So I think the main thing is people need to be accepting, and we need to keep kind of nourishing that kind of accepting everyone's views and
Yeah.
allowing more space for discussion and discourse to happen.
I agree, and I think well said. I think the scariness of being out there is that we can naturally worry that it might affect your career in some shape or form. I have some active friends at the moment, right? And one of like my clients who is amazing, super talented. It's like, well done on the podcast, Steve, but you'll never get me on there. And I'm like, why not? And he's like, over my dead body. And this is like one of the most smartest people I know, with no real controversial views, but I just totally get it. He's just like, I am gonna do my thing in the background, and I'm not gonna be on the air. However, I believe, like you said, that actually there's that deep, there's that deep feeling of I don't trust if this gets out there, maybe how my employers will react or how my team will react, and
Mm.
I think that we can all. It's good to loosen up a bit, and what I've learned anecdotally is that once you get on a live stream, you're not really going to say anything that bad. And if something is misinterpreted, then just be open about it and say what you meant and move on from it. But there's probably usually a lot more to gain from it. So, for example, you've won that award last night. I imagine that's been a lot of work in the making. Or let's talk about a few of your content creation friends like Tom Randry. It doesn't. It's like YouTube is a grind. It's hard work. Like it's
Mhm.
not all the glamour of just the image, the video. You got to edit that thing. You got to get the punches right. You got to work out when to post this content. You got to work out the message. You got to get the thumbnail. It's so much work there that
Mhm.
actually it's like this whole different life alongside your career. I mean, how have you found it? Where do you get the time with a beautiful baby doing your part three and as well as content creating?
I got asked that in an interview recently, and I
Yeah,
get asked that a lot by just like people who, when they find out what I do, and they're like, "How the hell do you do that?" And it's been years of me trying to find a way to answer this question, and I don't know how,
yeah, go
because
on.
I'm not cognizant of why. I'm not consciously thinking of why it's working. I just feel like I'm on an auto drive. That's what I
Yeah,
was saying as well.
good.
That's what I said in this speech yesterday as well. I feel like, and I hope and I feel there's other people out there who are also just on auto drive. I think you yourself, you're heavily involved in the profession and you're doing crazy production, content creation, creating these platforms. You're on
Well,
auto
that's
drive, I assume, as well.
Well, that's kind, and you're right. I always joke. We have a mutual friend, Sana at Scale. Now, I would drive Sana insane because, and I get along with very well. Why I mean I drive her insane is that I have no lists. I go with my gut and I whack out the content, and that kind of works. The downside is though sometimes no less it can get a bit stressful. And like me and you were relaxed doing this today. I didn't really send you much preparation. I did a graphic. I said, "Hey, show up. Trust you. Hopefully, you trust me." But then what I've learned is I've got to be respectful of different people, and sometimes people like a briefing. They like to know
Yeah.
that to bring the mic, and so that's what I've got to learn from Hamza, rather than just going, "Hey, don't worry, it'll be fine. We'll live
Well,
stream."
no, everyone's got their own workflow.
Mm,
Everyone's got their own efficiency. I think, the way I answered that question in the interview was, it feels like everything is aligned for me, and it took a
yeah,
while for that to happen. So, the YouTube content creation, it's kind of compartmentalized in my head.
yeah,
The Instagram drawings that I do, that's also a separate part in my head. The professional work is also, I mean, that takes up a bigger part of my head because I'm doing it 5 days a week.
yeah.
That's also a separate part of my head. But if you made a diagram, each one of them is connected, and
Right.
you could think of it as all the, because okay, look, I think the basis is I'm obsessively curious. I'm obsessively
Yeah,
curious.
I
I'm an
love that.
overthinker. Yeah, I constantly make my wife's life hell because of deep thinking and questioning, and
Can I ask, what does your wife do? Is she an architect or another career?
no, she's a midwife. That's why I
Right.
cited
Okay. I think
midwifery.
I think it's good when I've seen the architecture couple, the two architects, and while I one of my they're really good friends. I can go for drinks with, but then they'll have that talk with each other. I think it's quite nice. Then you both got different careers. Is that right?
Yeah. That's also an interesting conversation of, like, how you can. Some people like the fact that they can come home and they can relate 100% with that person.
Mm,
But part of me also loves the fact that I can come home and I can switch off. And
yeah.
to be honest, I say that, but I do bombard her with architectural stuff. She
Yeah.
checks my
Yeah.
posts before I post them.
Well,
She's
that's
probably
good.
as knowledgeable as a part one architectural assistant. She could probably do that job. She's learned a lot from my annoying behavior. But no, I think what I was saying is everything is connected to the
Yes.
point where, whenever I'm curious about a topic, which is often,
Oh, bless
it's
me.
it's like a separate stream that I have in my head. And I think, okay, I need to go and find a specialist to talk to that about. That's
Mm,
then going to inform the way I look at my practice and look at my work. And that's why it's important for me to find the perfect practice who's going to, you know, who's going to, as we talked about this before as well, who's going to kind of accommodate for someone. I didn't use this word, but people have used it. The practice that I'm talking to use it about thought leadership. You know,
right.
if you have a practice that embraces thought leadership, that's the kind of place I need to be,
Yeah.
because I will get on and I will work really hard and I will do all of the serious professional work, but I'm also going to be thinking about the wider profession,
Yeah.
and
Great.
it's and I can confidently say they're going to aid each other.
Yeah.
So for me, it's all
I
connected.
I think so, and I'm really pleased that you're saying, talking about your employer getting involved, embracing it, because I do think that what I would say is that because I work with a lot of companies, and especially when in terms of recruitment and attracting people and interest and engagement in the company, like getting involved on these social media channels is worth its weight in gold, because and as the agenda is, and I'll bring up the banner here because this is a professional podcast, but we're discussing the future generation of architects, and I love what you're talking about. It's about communication. It's about reaching out to people and getting involved with each other, but to do that, you can't shy away from social media. It's good to go to events in person. It's good to have that conversation. And my understanding is that conversation can materialize in different ways. I mean, we were speaking on Clubhouse a few months ago, and okay, I'm not on there so much right now, and you are too, but wherever the conversation is, I think you've got to kind of ebb and flow and go with it. I think to an extent, YouTube is
Mm.
always here to stay because of the medium itself is quite powerful, and it's on people's
Yeah,
TVs.
everybody's just moving towards call it a criticism or a new era, but people are now learning through video,
Yeah.
rather than reading a book, or they want to listen and watch something, because we are now
Yeah.
the attention deficit disordered
Yeah.
era.
Yeah. It's true, isn't it?
So
And
just got to go with the flow. Yeah.
yeah, that's interesting, because I find that some key people will listen to like the Spotify on the way to work. Some
Mm.
people have YouTube on in the background. I'll do a live event, and say now 50 people register, 10 to 20 people come in live, but the replay over the week will get 3, 4, 500 views, because people are watching it in bed, people are watching it after work, and it's like a
Mm.
totally different it's a totally different world in that front. The other key
Mm.
thing, which I know yours a hot topic because you've done it recently, is you had a chat with Charlie at the
Mm.
FAF, and so the Future Architects Front was quite a big deal, wasn't it? Because where I find it impressive, Amza, is that like that was bullshit. I imagine a lot of people were telling Charlie, "You can't say this. Your career will never recover. You can't say all that stuff. You can't go up against the big companies and talk about these issues." And he kind of did it, and I think that we can still feel the ripple of FAF. Whether or not these things change, the conversation is going, and they should change. But what I like is it kind of opened the door for the other aspect, which me and you are not directly involved, but we're indirectly in that world, where the FAF stood up for part two, architects entering the architectural profession and talking about how they feel the working conditions are. I mean,
Mm.
what's your thoughts on that movement?
There's so much to say about it, and that's why I did a podcast. My last episode was with him,
Oh yeah, we'll get
and
it out for people to find now. So where can we find
yeah,
that, Hamza? So people have a look.
well,
We get your YouTube channel, right?
YouTube for people want to watch it,
We'll
and
get that now.
all the audio streaming platforms if you want to listen.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, I've known Charlie like probably several months before the actual FAF launched,
right.
and we kind of met through the Mad Collective.
Yeah,
So it was yeah, there's the episode.
there you go. I was like 50 minutes in. You see, something popped up because I'm in a attention deficit world and I have a short attention span. But it's a good
Yeah.
episode so far, and I'll continue it. Great.
Yeah, so with him, I knew him way before, and I kind of saw the whole campaign start from literally just Instagram polls,
Yeah.
and obviously there'd been people in the past, like notably Adam Nathaniel Furman, who'd kind of kicked up the kind of the activism and kicked up the sort of awareness around exploitation for juniors in the field through a whistleblowing campaign. So the momentum was already kind of there. I think Charlie and the FAF kind of picked up on that momentum and really drove it home to the point where now the ARB have announced kind of the biggest changes in the last
very
half
good.
century. But I think the more interesting thing to talk about is, you know, I mean, I think we could get really deep into talking about working conditions, exploitation, and that could be a whole episode in of itself. But let me just kind of talk about the conclusion, because the conclusion that was reached by him, by the FAF, and by the subsequent poll that the Architects Journal did, and therefore what actions the ARB are now taking, was the same conclusion that I had, you know, a long time ago, and was actually the reason the Two Worlds Design podcast came up in the first place. So, you know, the Two Worlds Design podcast started from my apprehension of getting into a field and my kind of fear of being part of a field that was strictly doing one thing, like just building, because I instantly felt, as soon as I finished my part one, that holy crap, we've just been learning graphic design skills, we've just been learning narrative building, storytelling, fictional illustration, we've been learning about historical writing, socioeconomic, you know, politics. I can go on. We've been learning about all these things. What other profession requires you to learn that much, that quickly, that intensely, to that level? Okay, then you add on to that when you do a specific architecture project. So let's say you're doing an architecture project on, you know, let's say you're doing it on biophilic design or something. You then become a little, you know, a 6-month-long specialist in biophilic technology. You start looking at sustainable system. So what I'm saying is, architecture is also the profession of polymaths. And, you know, maybe I'm being a bit arrogant here, but I'm biased. What can I say? I think our profession has so much more potential. Think of all the things I just named. To then, how much are we restricting ourselves to then just come out and we're doing toilet details, we're doing door details, and we're designing a building? And I do not want to take away from the power of what, you know, a building does, what you know, what the urban environment does, what actual built structure does, because those things are magical in of themselves, and they change the world in a way, they form the world. But there is so much scope for when you leave architecture school. It doesn't make sense for people to go from such a diversified education system to then something that is so narrow. And we're seeing that change. And so that's how the whole Two Worlds Design podcast started. I spoke to, first episode was with Shahid Salim, and he's, you know, he's pretty much like a historical scholar who's redefining sacred space in the UK due to his research. But he's an architectural, you know, he's an architect, he's a professor. Second episode with Adam Furman. I've told you about him already. People probably know him as well. He's, you know, architectural background, dropped out before part 3, and now he's like award-winning designer for interiors and furniture, and just an amazing kind of philosophical mind as well. So I can go on. So the whole podcast is based on that. So after I spoke to Charlie, and after the whole campaign went through that kind of, you know, incredibly fast-paced kind of viral phase, and I think we spoke about on the podcast that COVID played a massive role in really catalyzing the movement, because everybody was in the digital space, everybody was able to get behind the campaign. And the conclusion he reached, and they reached, was we need to be more multidisciplinary. The term architect, the architectural profession, needs to open its doors, open its wings, to provide more diversity in the services we offer, to allow more people to call themselves qualified architects who offer different ranges of services. So those things will essentially increase the value of the architect. And once the value of the architect is increased, all these things like exploitation, low pay, you know, exploitative mistreatment, all these things, they start to inevitably improve. So, you know, I think what Charlie has done, what the FAF has done, is incredible, because what it's done is provided a robust case for this movement.
Mm.
it's actually initiated the conversations to happen at the top tables. And the ARB are now making massive changes to architectural education.
It's amazing, and I think hats off to FAF and everyone involved, and everyone supporting it really, and because the conversation has to be had. But I love what you said there, and I want to pick up on a few things on that because you're right. In architecture, you start in the uni, and and just so you know, right, I imagine you got a really good grade for your dissertation. You had a cohesive narrative. That was not my strength, right? But I was good at pitching work. I was good at doing the presentations. That was my thing. And I did get a first for the design, but the other modules is a bit 50-50, But there's room for everyone in architecture, and the skills that you're on about is amazing because I think it takes someone brave as well. It's amazing to hit your part three. You don't have to go the traditional route. There's room for people. I know successful people that have built businesses on the back of a degree and diploma in architecture. I know programmers who do. One of my best friends in university is part one who's gone on to be involved in the user interface of awesome apps, and they love his architectural design. And an interesting fact is that so the platform, the Architecture Social, is built in Mighty Networks. The chief engineer behind the Mighty Networks used to be an architect, and I think,
Really?
yeah, and it was a small world
Wow.
because I was speaking to the owner of it because I'm one of her customers, and she's like, yeah, and you look at the new tech demo, and the guy when he's making the tech demo for Mighty Networks, he bases it on an idea called California Architects. And I'm like, that's the Architecture Social. So I dropped him a message and he's like, yeah,
Wow.
I used to do it and now I do this. So, these skills, once I think you have the eyes, you study as an architect, you have that. And even how I approach business, I look at it, like from the perspective that I was taught. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's
I
it's
think
it's it's interesting. What do you think,
it,
Hamza?
it's gonna make a lot of people uncomfortable. It already has. I think maybe the generation or the people who think of I mean, look, to the point of there is a place for everyone in architecture. For
Mm,
those people who are precious about, look, we have a very streamlined function in society. We design and create buildings and spaces for people to inhabit and occupy and whatever, right?
yeah,
I don't think that should be lost because all this talk of like diversifying architects coming out of architecture school and then they go and do brand marketing psychology or something. It's like, yeah, they're going to be amazing at that because they've learned how people think. They've learned about human behavior. They've learned
correct.
about what societies need. Therefore, they're going to be very good at those jobs as well. And that's why you see people go into those types of professions like UI and UX. So what what I was always thinking is there needs to be that level of flexibility, and that's why each
Mm,
episode I try to get someone different who's doing something different with their architectural background and education.
right.
um, and amazingly, also the FAF and Charlie said as well, that the ARB will be doing that. They will be bringing out more diversified opportunities for people to call themselves architects and opening up the education system. But it, like I said, is going to make people anxious. It's going to make certain people kind of scared. Like, what the hell? Even me, like, what the hell happens to my title once I get it? Hopefully next year. Like, it doesn't mean anything. And the
Yeah,
answer is maybe it won't, but we're part of this change now. And what I see actually happening is if the term and the title architect dissolves and it's no longer this thing which everyone's chasing, but instead you can equate it to sort of the fine art movement where, initially everything creative was art, but then technology came and now there's graphic design and there's what do you call it? Uh, Sculpture, or there's all sorts of different mediums of art, and each one is now a different field and now a different specialism. That the same thing could happen with architecture, that suddenly you're not going to a school of architecture, but you're going to a school of spatial user experience design, or
yeah,
you're going to a school of um, building integrated management technology,
Mm.
where your focus in that school might be everything BIM oriented, everything to do with the construction industry. Whereas in the previous example, you're going into that school of spatial, and you're learning about coding for people to use websites, and how does that actually correspond to the digital space that people occupy in the city, which was my dissertation, by the way. So, and we see a little example of this already, which is the London School of Architecture, which is an
Right.
apprenticeship specialized school,
Okay.
which broke off from the stereotypical architectural template and is now offering a route into architecture as a field that focuses very, very closely on the professional working world. And
I like that.
so
That's
there's scope
interesting.
for more of that.
Do you know what? I love it. And I tell you what, for someone that's I left architecture in a sense to go away, and I didn't do my part three. So send me your notes when you're done. Maybe I'll get my part three one day. But I think there's something interesting about architecture, and there's something that you can go into different careers, you can get all the money in the world and all this stuff, but there's something so cool about this like profession where you get to design, build, make an impact on the physical environment and make a difference on people's lives. So that's super, super cool. The thing that I keep thinking of, it doesn't need to be the one or the other, is it? So what I like about, let's bring it back to the start of the conversation, which you can relate to, like content creation. It can actually inform, it can spread awareness on the design that you do for an architectural practice. It's not one or the other, and that's what I find interesting. It's not like, oh, I've got this other dual life on YouTube. I'm a YouTuber at night, and in day I'm in an architecture practice. I'm convinced that they too can like constantly boost each other. And I think
100%.
that in terms of the future generation of architects, you need to keep constantly embracing those outer skills. So, I mean, the last thought I have on that, Hamza, before I open up the convo, is that was interesting because I work part time at Aqua Lowry, and we're looking at in the practice every member of staff kind of has a specialism that they take pride in, and they can be external factors which affect and bolster up the talent within the practice. So, for example, one person's actually passionate about all the regulations that's going on with fire, but we've also got a VR department, and the VR tool, which at first, you have a few beers and you think like, oh, we'll get the Steam VR in, it'll be cool. But that was actually used in a planning speaking with the planning consultants to convince them that actually you couldn't see from street level the proposal. So all these things that you learn out there really, really affect the practice. And I think that talking about content creation, it has more effect in my world. So, for example, the video that you did with Meg, I got to see inside their office. I haven't been there for many years, and people can see that. And I think that that could be, there's other values as well as directly in architecture, but indirectly for the company through content creation, through other people's passions.
Yeah, amazing. 100% agree. It's like one, as I explained, one scenario there of things kind of disintegrating in architecture practice, or architects themselves kind of being different things. But the other option is just the definition of an architect opens up. And
Yeah.
you look at firms around the world, and even in the UK right now, where this is what I was saying, like we need to diversify the services we offer, because
Yeah.
and it's already happening. So like, it probably happened before I even thought of it. I'm not saying I came up with this idea. It's probably been happening way before. But I
Yeah.
realized that, once a practice opens up the services it offers, business improves. And
Mm-hmm.
weirdly enough, as controversial as you want this to sound, or anyone wants this to sound, it's not. But a lot of the problems are caused by bad business in architecture. A
Right.
lot of the because architects suck at business, and you've done the talk with Ryan Willard, and I've had him on my podcast, and people should go and listen to those to hear the specialists talk about that. But it's like, there are practices now, and I've been looking at, for example, like Gensler.
Mm-hmm.
They have wings of journalistic practitioners in their practice. They have wings of people who are reaching directly to product design. So the practices themselves are opening up the services they offer, and it doesn't mean that the term architect needs to dissolve, but it could just mean that architectural practice, architects themselves are going to be doing way more, and business is going to be good, and we're going to have more sort of polymath like figures in architecture.
Yeah.
You know, Elon Musk types, as controversial as he is to architects.
I kind of enjoy Elon sometimes, and other times I'm like, oh my gosh, the stuff you're saying. I was so engrossed in the conversation that I was a terrible host, and I forgot to bring up what was on the screen. And so an anonymous LinkedIn user, so you've got to click the allow rights on StreamYard, said, don't forget that the MST Architectural Apprenticeship of Cambridge, which is a course for gaining your degree while in practice. That was a shout out. And how cool is the Architectural Apprentice scheme? I think it's amazing. Hamza, what do you think about it?
No, it's good for that LinkedIn user. It's a strange name, LinkedIn user. Sorry,
anonymous.
But you're so right to bring that up as well. It's not just the LSA who's pushing the boundaries with the apprenticeship style curriculum, but you know, I don't know who did it first. I must admit, it might have been Sheffield. It might have been some of the other universities that have integrated apprenticeship schemes. It might have been Cambridge. I don't know, but yeah, that user is very right to say that, you know, apprenticeship style education is happening across the board.
Absolutely. Mr. Anonymous or Mrs. Anonymous, thank you for bringing that up because it's a good point. Now, Victoria is here. Now, Victoria, thank you for joining us. Victoria, me and you did email each other a bit before. I am sorry. I will have to pick up the conversation, but I would love to know everything that's been happening. And apparently there was a quote last night, it sounds like, which is awesome. And so I am sure, Hamza, you do think that it is a really important initiative and start of a legacy. So we'll have to check out that. Victoria.
I left a comment on Victoria's post today, just that, you know, I'm talking about all of this shift and the ARB and all of these, you know, amazing initiatives that people are doing, yourself, Charlie, you know, the podcast. But yesterday at the Thornton Education Trust Awards night, I felt that shift as well, which was, there is more recognition now for people who are pushing those boundaries in our field. And, you know, it's people like Victoria Thornton, it's places, you know, like the Architectural Association, who are allowing for those changes to happen. And that is just, you know, I'm inspired by that. I you know, they have my full support. It's an amazing time right now. A shift is happening. And I think the Thornton Education Trust is going to leave a legacy for sure.
Amazing. I'm learning more and more. I'm familiar with the Poor Collective, which is awesome. You know, I think this is amazing. I will, after this, I'm going to properly do a bit more research and check out the really, really cool resources here. Yes. But I love that kind of stuff. We need more of this.
What they're doing is they're trying to really encourage, you know, the professionals in this field, the people in education in this field, to do what we're trying to do, I think, Stephen, which is open up the conversation, make architecture accessible to the younger generation, and just be part of this movement to, you know, make it accessible to everyone.
I think so. Yeah.
And you know, I think part of that is allowing things to flex in our profession as well. So yeah.
Amazing. Well, I think, look, this is really interesting. Now we have a bit of fun here, okay? So, because we're going to have a bit of serious, but we need a bit of fun. And so my thoughts on content creation is that, you know, there's a lot of stuff out there, but we need the balance of entertainment versus
education.
Education is important. So what else have I got here? So I've told you I've got a few memes. So what have I got?
Isn't it weird though, by the way, that's a mantra that we all just know without even discussing it? You know, had to battle the worlds of education and entertainment.
Well, content creators. Well, this is it. I mean, my favorite meme is David Brent's dance, which has nothing to do with architecture, but it's like, just reminds me, it's like quintessentially what like working in an office can be. I love the series The Office. And
wait, play that again, because that's what I did when I won the award.
So I got this one, which is him looking, little wink, and then the little dance. You're like, cheers, Victoria. Happy to be
Yeah.
here. We walked up
I,
there.
I wish I did that. I did not do that, but I
You
do
should
wish I
do.
did.
I have a friend in architecture who will remain anonymous, but we used to in the staff parties get a bit drunk and do the David Brent dance Oh, I almost said the name of the practice then, which wouldn't be
Oh,
hard to work out if you look at my LinkedIn, because I've only worked at one architecture practice, EPR.
y-
So yeah, I used to do that in a dinosaur costume.
do it
That
now.
what the I can't. I'm sitting down, but I'll give it a proper go for you next
It takes
time.
a twist, right? You got to do it.
Yeah, I'm not that flexible. I tell you what will make you laugh, because in the coronavirus, building the architecture social has been sitting down for a lot of time. So I'm like I'm eating, like, have you seen Little Britain? I'm eating dust. I'm eating nothing. I'm just drinking water. So I'm a little bit miserable at the moment. So it's
Yeah.
it's good that it's online. Now I tell you what we'll do, because you're a seasoned host. So for as long as you want now, how about before we end, you get to ask me any questions that you want, and you can flip this around. It can be about what I think the future of architects. I think we covered a lot of points. It can be like my thoughts on behind the scenes in recruitment. It can be about the architecture social. Is there anything that you want to ask me? Or maybe give
How
you a
much
little
money do you make?
how
I'm
much money do I make?
joking.
How much money do I make? Do you know what? People get so awkward talking about money, don't they? So awkward.
They do. They
I
do.
made a lot of money in recruitment. I'm now setting up
Yeah.
my recruitment business and working part time. So I'm technically the brokest I've been for a while. However, this is entrepreneur world. So
Yeah. Let's do it.
once the money comes in, so I've just got to pay up my bills, but the rest is profit. So the plan is to make enough money for me to have a good life, support the architecture social, and hey, I wouldn't mind a nice fancy car. Do you know what I mean? It
What
would
car?
be nice.
Wait, let me
Uh,
guess.
Maybe I one
I
or
don't.
two
I
if
don't.
in recruitment, right? It'd have to be
Huh?
electric car because of the sustainable agenda.
I would have. I was about to
Get a
guess
Tesla.
Tesla.
Yeah, I mean that is such the content creator's car choice on YouTube, isn't it? They go like
I think it's an architect's
Tesla.
car as well. I think architects would love that kind of car.
Yeah, I think so.
Design, sustainability, all that.
Do you know what on salaries though? So if you want a bit of fun, one of the things I've developed on the Architecture Social is an open salary guide, and people can put in their salaries, and
Mm.
that salary is then open. It doesn't put your name on there, but you can say, I'm an architect, I'm on 32 grand in London or 34 grand. Because the secretism with salary is bonkers to me. You know, it's
Okay,
like,
well, this is my question to you.
go on.
What is for young practitioners in the field right now?
Yeah.
I know that there's a big, obviously everyone is a bit fed up with low pay
Yes.
generally, you know, and I am
Okay.
also of that school of thought where you're not just going to demand high pay and suddenly you get more pay.
Yeah.
It's a very complicated process. It's linked to what we've just been talking about how you increase the value of the architect.
Yeah.
But what is with all your background in recruitment and professional world,
Yeah.
what is a good way of increasing or getting a salary rise and as a young practitioner?
Okay, good question. So actually, we're in a good time at the moment. So RIBA released a survey that they've done, and for the first time in the UK, we've not had an increase in architects. So you could look at that as, okay, that's not good for the profession growing diversity, but where it is good for, and I'm going to put my business commercial hat on, it's good for commanding salaries. So immediately, less architects means that you are a more highly desirable commodity because there's less people. You know, that's just the way the world works. Less people, more demanding skills of the people that are there, the higher the salaries will come up. Okay. Now, it's harder to ask for salaries in a bigger company where there's structures, but it's still possible. So some people, so there's big companies like Process and Partners, you've got the Genzas of the world, and you can always ask for salary increases in there. Just be aware there might be a process. So the trick is ask sooner than later, because then you get the salaries there. In a smaller architecture practice, there's probably less of a process in between, but there will be a direct relation to value. So key things is about taking responsibility, doing extracurricular stuff, but also bringing in value to the business. And that doesn't necessarily mean in longer hours, right? So if you develop rapport with clients, that's a very good way to make sure that you're never unemployed in the future. If you develop relationships with clients and you leave a company, then in theory, if you're good, they're going to ask where you're going. They might want to work with you. And that is super highly desirable. So there's lots of different ways. I think, in short, saving time on projects, being a good people manager is always a good thing. If you can curate a team, make sure it doesn't go over budget, then you can normally command a higher salary for it. However, or the one I think always works, if you have a good relationship with clients and you constantly delivering on that, then you're going to be in a very good position to negotiate a salary, because you go, well, I look after XYZ developers. I know Jeff. We have a good relationship. I deliver for him. He calls me up on a Saturday. I take that call. So there's a few different ways, and content creation, I think, to loop into it, like we talked about before, is a value. But again, to a client, you always have to bring it back to a business point of view. So it could be exposure. It could be about you bringing in graduates, Hamza, on your channel who are aware of the brand. And I think that it's stuff like that. But you always have to bring it back to a business case. Working hard is good, but talk about deliverables, talk about stuff that you've done, talk about relationships you have, talk about how you can save time and save money. And in the future, you talked about, as architects in business, we don't always make the best business decisions. And you're right, fee negotiation in the future. If you're strong with fee negotiations, you're going to be the hero in the architecture practice, aren't you? If you're holding out that last % with a developer, because you're just going to make everyone's life easier, you're going to have a better fee, you're going to do it. So there's lots of different ways. And I'm happy to expand upon that with you on another time as well. But those are
but just
thoughts.
Quickly, I want to say, obviously, that was just so much wisdom so quickly as well. So when you get on my podcast, we'll talk about that in depth. But
okay,
even just what to kind of go full circle, what we were just talking about, of like, if the architect and the practice diversifies its services, imagine how much more they could get out of their employees as well. Because if they had operations in the practice where they had clients who needed graphic design being done, holistic design, we're talking about a client that maybe needs the whole branding done. And this happens, obviously, you're going to take, when you're doing a project, you might not just be doing the shell of the building, but you're doing the interiors, you're doing the packages, you're doing the branding, hospitality especially. So it's just amazing that we've gone full circle. Kudos to you for being such an awesome conversationalist as well. So yeah, man, that hopefully we speculate on the future of the profession.
Well, I'm sure there's lots to talk about, and we will pick it up another time. This has been quite a nice hour. You've got a mini baby, a mini Hamza knocking around in the future. Last quick question before you go. If your son says, I'm going to become an architect, what was your reaction be?
I would say define architect.
Oh, that's gonna be one for the future. We will send your son this podcast in 16 years, and he will probably say, "No way, Dad, I'm going to be a YouTuber." And actually, probably with your experience, you'll go, "Son, there'll be a lot of hard work, but there's a lot of rewards there. So you keep doing it." Hamza, you're an absolute pleasure. You're an absolute delight, as always. Thank you so much for joining us in the Two Design. Check out all the good stuff, but check out Hamza Shaikh's podcast and the YouTube channel. And I think you can find everything from the YouTube channel. That's a good way to find you. You're on LinkedIn. Any last words before you go, Hamza, where people can find you?
Yeah, I mean, just Google Two Worlds Design. It's all letters, TWO Worlds Design, or Google me, and you'll find hopefully everything. Worked very hard on search engine optimization, so you should find it.
Well, there you go.
Thanks to you, man.
You laugh at this, but my pleasure. Look at that. This was posted, an image on the Arctics of Social last year. So if you get lost, I've got a link to
Brilliant.
Hamza's website from Pierre. Thank you, everyone, for being in the audience and joining in. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Hamza.
And quickly, Stephen, you're doing this is an amazing initiative to have this kind of. I don't think anyone's doing live conversational discussions on architecture. So keep doing what you're doing, man. This is important.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm going to try and get the architectural practices in. So if we've got a brave architectural practice who's going to be one of the first one, I promise we'll make it worth his while. But that's the way of the future, and I really appreciate that coming from you with your podcast. We're going to sign out now, and you can be the family man and do all the good stuff. Thank you, Hamza. Have a good day, and thank you, everyone in the audience. Take care.